wanting to be able to travel. And then I wanted to leave California and move to Savannah or Nashville. So it was like, how can I make this happen and have enough money and not be tied to a W-2 job for the rest of my life? And next year, even if the rates drop, it's still going to be more expensive. So, you can't let that stop you. Do it now. Don't overpay. Like, do your research. And that's really what it's about.
Do you need to grow yourself as you scale and grow your portfolio? Well, that is what we are diving into today with Tracy, one of our Inner Circle members from California. Tracy, just from even getting to work with you over this past year, I have gotten to see you grow in leaps and bounds. So thank you very much for joining us today for the Lady Landlords podcast and sharing your story. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. Good to be here.
First question I always just like to start with is, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience outside of real estate investor, outside of that, but just tell us a little bit about the woman that you are.
Yeah. So born and raised in California, grew up in a small town, working class family, first in my immediate family to go to college. And I was always the adventurous one. It was always kind of like, the family is like, what are you doing? Like, are you sure you want to do that? And just really tried to take advantage of, all those opportunities that came along, which is very different coming again from that background than coming from a background with, connections and family that has the money and the time to do those things. And so some of the things I've done, I taught in South Central Los Angeles, including during the Watts riots. I was a teacher trainer in the Peace Corps in Ukraine for 2+ years. And I sailed from California down to Mexico on a sailboat, spent time backpacking through Thailand and Malaysia. I've traveled to a lot of countries now. That's really my passion, and that's a lot of the reason behind the real estate investing is the additional money it helps to finance all of those. When I was in college, I spent a semester in New Zealand, going to university in Wellington on a study abroad program, which was really interesting. And just, like, again, any opportunity to get out and explore and experience another place, another culture has just really pulled me in. And, I very quickly, well, maybe not that quickly, I wish it had been faster, but anyways, I realized that waiting for someone else to travel with me was holding me back. And my first trip that I did solo was supposed to be a group of us going to New Orleans for a half marathon. I did about, I think, 8 half marathons walking. I don't run. And both people that were supposed to go with me dropped out at the last minute. So I was like, I'm going anyways. And that just like kicked it off. And so I've done a lot of travel by myself, and found ways to just really have a great time. And there's pluses and minuses to it. But that's kind of, again, back to that adventurous part of me that I try to nurture as much as possible.
As I think we all should. I'm also a huge travel bug myself, as you know. I love traveling by myself. I feel like it is a great way to grow, get to know yourself, my favorite part is I get to do all the things that I want to do and I don't have to compromise that.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think it's really important, and I think all women should really have that opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to do some type of trip on my own. And I'm glad to see it. I know that you are still doing those trips and have a couple upcoming this year, which I know you're very, very excited for. So I'm glad too that we can also both relate on the fact that really real estate investing helps drive and helps fund some of also our travels. So we'll get into that in a minute or two. But I will always like to find out, how did real estate investing even come across your path? Was that something you fell into, something you saw your parents doing? Where did that kind of enter your universe?
Yeah. It's a good question. And I'm not entirely sure how started the interest, but I just love real estate. I love seeing what you can do with it. I love seeing the before and after, and how a home can suit some people and not others. And it's just it's really fascinating from that aspect of it. And so when I came back from Mexico after having, spent a season down there on the sailboat, was able to get my real estate license in California, tried out that whole being a real estate salesperson for a while. Sales is not my thing. And I also just did not have the connection. So that did not work, but I loved being in real estate. So
Mm-hmm.
I pivoted into, W-2 corporate real estate. And I worked in commercial real estate as a lease administrator for Class A office leasing,
Mm-hmm.
ownership and then leasing. And so learned a tremendous amount. And during that process, 2008 came along, and with the market crash, I was married at that point, I think, and convinced my ex that, as I was looking at, because whether it's Realtor or Trulia or Zillow or whatever, those were always like, I'm on them all the time because I love looking like, and it's not just the whole like research paralysis. It's also just like, I love knowing what's going on. And so in that 2008 crash, I was looking at real estate. I'm like, wait a minute, like the prices are at a point where we could buy and the rents are at a point where we could actually make money in
Mm-hmm.
California, which is crazy. So we looked in one location and it wasn't, we decided not to invest there because it was a bedroom community. And so then we looked up in Sacramento and we found working class area in Sacramento with good schools, and that just started. We bought 3 houses that year. The first one was not financeable. The tenants again, as real estate investors, here's one of your tenant horror stories. The house was being foreclosed. It was a
Mm-hmm.
rental. The tenants put a hose in it and left it running because they were mad about being evicted. Fortunately, had a slab, but there was a couple feet up on the walls all around of mold and stuff, so all that drywall had to be cut out, and
Oh my God.
lots and lots of work,
And a
um,
cost,
and the
right?
cost. Yeah.
Cost of just running water for who knows how long.
Right. So we got that for a good price. My ex did all the work. I did all the business, the research, the finding stuff, and he would do the work, hire helpers, that kind of thing. After that, we bought 2 more, just regular financed. We did take money out of the first one. Then in early 2009, we bought the 4th one. Another, coincidence that you'll like here, Becky. I was like 8 months pregnant, looking in Sacramento in 100, plus degree heat, trying to find houses. And we looked at, house after house after house. So, and even like, as an infant, my baby is living there in this, house that's under under massive construction or refurbishment. So, yeah, so it's, you do what you got to do.
Right.
And then, so yeah, so I mean, that's how it all started. And then, we got divorced. And I got 2, he got 2. And, at that point, I wasn't making a lot. The extra income was really important, but I was also house poor, which was very stressful for me. That's kind of one of my, like, because the way I grew up, and, making more money now, but not having any backup. It was always stressful for me to not to kind of feel like I'm on that edge. So I did end up selling one, and the goal was at that point to build up enough down payment so that I could get like a duplex where I live,
Mm-hmm.
that that I could live in and still have the income from the other side. Well, where I live, the duplex at the time were going like 1.6 million.
Right.
Yeah. Well, like within a year, they were now going for over 2 million. I mean,
Wow.
it really just like shot up. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. And so when my other long-term tenant left in Sacramento, they were able to buy their home, which was wonderful. I went back and forth and eventually decided to sell it and do a 1031 exchange. Through the work that I do, I'm a real estate asset manager, working in banks, managing high net worth individual real estate holdings. I knew a lot about all of this buying, selling, 1031 exchanges. And so I didn't want to lose, all those gains that I had. And we're talking small amounts. Yeah, yes, it's in
Right.
California, but still when I sold it, I think it was still under 300,000. We're
Okay.
not talking $1 million homes. We're talking, in the 200s. And so I had traveled to Nashville and I loved the area. And so I decided, again, looked at the prices, looked at the rents. I was like, I can do this. I can make this work. And a friend of mine introduced me to a fantastic realtor who's totally dialed in, found a great property, again, under 300,000, got it rented, lots of cash flow. I mean, it was great. And that's kind of been my model.
Mm-hmm.
Buy a really good, buy a good at least 3 bedroom, 2 bath home in excellent neighborhood with good schools, under 300,000 that rents well, and put 25% down so that it cash flows, all of those things. So that was the model, and that's what I felt really comfortable with. That's my comfort zone. It worked. I bought 2 more houses, so I had 3. But it's kind of like, even at those prices, you have to save up not only your 25% down, but whatever monies you need to fix things up, because there's usually paint and carpet at least, or flooring, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's stuff that happens, and like, obviously you have to have reserves. Um, and so that was kind of where I'm like, okay, I don't want to keep doing this forever. My son, some of my deadlines has always been, my son will be 18. He'll be
Mm-hmm.
18 next year. And that's when I'm no longer tied to having to live in the Bay Area. I can leave. I can live wherever I want after he's 18. And so that's kind of what ended up. I saw the article about you in the New York
Yeah.
Times, and I was
I
like,
still
this
can't
is
believe that.
cool. This is great, because I haven't had other women investors that I could talk to about it, other
Right.
people that, understood my situation, and that, understood that I know what I'm doing, that I could talk to. And so joining the Lady Landlords Facebook group was, and taking some of your, the classes that you've done was just like this kickoff, and of like, okay, I need to do more here. I need to figure this out.
Good. I have a couple of questions. I want to go back a little bit,
Yeah.
but I'm glad that you found our community, right? I think that was crazy when you said, you saw us in the New York Times, which was like, as a New Yorker, kind of a highlight of my life.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely career-wise, professionally. So I love that you came in from that, which so many of the other members that joined Lady Landlords also saw that and felt that same way. I don't have to be alone. I am not on my own for this. And we're able to really find a great community for them. So I'm happy that that gave you that introduction and showed you. I mean, we have now, what, over 55,000 women in Lady Landlords. So I'm very happy that you found us
Yeah.
at the time you
Me
did.
too.
I mean, that article was probably about 2 years old by this point. So I'm glad you found us sooner than later. I want to go back. You mentioned that you got your real estate license in California.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, did getting your license as an agent, has that helped you in any way now being an investor? Yes or no?
It was so long ago, and if I didn't do the work that I do, I think that
Mm-hmm.
I could point more towards that as being a help. But
Mm-hmm.
because of my job, when when the so again, I work for banks. We're named as trustee. When we're successor trustee due to someone's death, and we're settling the estate, I often will sell the home, or the apartment building, or the CVS, or the industrial building, whatever they held, that it's
Mm-hmm.
getting split up, and maybe the heirs are charities or whatever. And so I've been selling, typically it's like 10, sometimes even as many as 15 properties a year for the last, I don't even know how long, honestly, like 10 years, yeah, something. And so that's a lot of experience on managing the sale process, hiring
Right.
agents, I have to interview 3 agents every single time and pick who's going to be, quote, the best. So that experience is definitely been a huge factor in not only understanding the process, but giving me the confidence to be able to go out and do this, and I understand what I'm doing.
I think that's probably more of a key. I feel that I see so many women always get stuck in, well, I need more information, need more information, need more information. And often I'm sitting there and I'm like, you have the information, you know the knowledge. It's the
Yeah.
confidence to use that information that really makes a difference. So I'm glad, really by repetition, that you got to a spot where you felt very comfortable with that. Now, here you have these properties in California. You mentioned, selling one that you still were tied there until your son turned 18, that was still the place that you were going to be living. You went on vacation in Nashville and said, that's it. This is where I'm going to invest. You had never owned out of state before. It doesn't really sound like, once again, you didn't grow up in Nashville. You didn't even grow up in Tennessee or anywhere in that area. What had you feel confident that, cool, I can live in California and I can invest in a states away that is hundreds of miles away that is in a different time zone? What had you feeling
Yeah.
confident with that?
So I did a lot of research. Again, yeah, as I mentioned, I love now I'm truly is my thing. Before it was always Craigslist for rentals. So, I
Yep.
again always looking for those properties like, okay, where's a good neighborhood? Because I did not want to invest in a bad neighborhood. I tell my property manager and realtor in Kansas, in Wichita now, if you and I don't feel comfortable going there, I'm not buying there.
Right.
Like, I need to feel comfortable being able to walk around the neighborhood and, not feel like I'm going to get mugged. Because that's, those are the tenants I want as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of it is just that research. So when I was looking to buy out of state, I was also looking at Colorado. I can't remember if it was like Bloomfield or, one of like the smaller college towns. I have a lot of exposure through work of where people are investing and in what kind of, they're investing millions in an apartment building or whatever, but still, like you can invest, a smaller amount in a rental house. And I just didn't have this good feeling about the Colorado. And what
Yeah.
kind of kicked me over the edge for going out of state was, and honestly, I think it was a trip I did to New Zealand on my own. And I did this 3-day, it's lodge to lodge hike in this gorgeous national park. And the
Mm.
guide, they had moved from like Germany or something and opened like a B&B, and then they got tired of doing that and they pivoted and they're doing something else. And it was kind of that, like, you don't have to make a decision for the rest of your life. And I think that's
Right.
the other part of what investors kind of can stumble on is, I have to make the right decision. Oh my God, like I have to, decide this for the next 20 years. No, you don't. And that's kind of what put me over the edge. Like, so when I was in Nashville, it was for, again, another half marathon, a rock and roll half marathon. So you walk all through these different neighborhoods. And I saw people out there having their little parties while they cheered on
Yeah.
the people walking by and drinking their, mimosas and whatnot. And I'm like, this is great. This would be a place that I would consider moving. And again, so I was like, if it doesn't work, I'll sell it and buy somewhere else. It's not, and it
Right.
was a stable enough area that I wasn't likely to lose my shirt to. It's, it wasn't a risky location that I chose. And then again, having a friend who could introduce me to a realtor. The first time we went, we easily looked at like 20 properties, driving around different neighborhoods, learning the area, seeing what the homes are like. And then the second time I went, we, had narrowed it down to, I don't remember, maybe, 5 to 7, and put in an offer on the last one we saw. And that's one that, the first one I bought there, and I still own that
Oh,
one.
wow. Huh.
So
It's funny how that works out. What I'm
yeah,
hearing there was one, calculated risk, right? You knew you weren't going to lose your shirt, right? It was something that investing really is synonymous with risk. It is. That's what
exactly.
we're speculating. That's the point. That is literally what investing means. So I love the fact that you still went into it and just didn't say like woohoo on a total whim I'm going to buy here, but said calculated risk. I should be okay. I'm willing to move forward with that. Two, you also realize that things can change and that that's okay. You weren't all of a sudden just set in stone that this was the place you bought. Now you're stuck. Now that's it. You have to own in Nashville for the rest of your life. And then three, I'm also hearing boots on the ground. You picked in a place where you knew somebody else, where you would have some other person that can, you said, drive you around to see different neighborhoods. I'm sure that friend would also be like, so we're not going to cross these tracks. I don't go over there. And you would be like, great, that was the information that I was looking for. I didn't want that type of area. That's not what I felt comfortable in. So you had somebody be able to walk you through that rather than you just kind of randomly wandering around, or also relying on a salesperson, which doesn't necessarily have your best interests in heart or always know exactly what it is that you're looking for. So
Yeah.
I like that you went into that in a very smart way and made an effort to understand what you were buying, why you were buying it, and what your exit strategy was in case of emergency.
Yeah, exactly.
I was
It,
going
it
to
just,
say, so you had your places in Tennessee, right?
yes.
So that kind of grew like first kind of space there, but that's where you kind of said you started to kind of feel a little bit stuck with 25% down, always buying the investment properties, having to have your closing costs, always having then somebody else manage because you were using a property manager in Tennessee, correct?
No, I do not have a property manager in Tennessee. Back to because my realtor is so great, anytime I need anything, she's got the people, right? And so she connected me, and over time, I've also so now I have the I know the who to call. I have especially a handyman company that he's licensed, but he'll do kind of anything, and anything he can't do, he knows the tradespeople that are again reliable and good, so he'll give me the referrals out to those people. And because they're in good neighborhoods, I've got good white collar people that have stable jobs and that pay. I hate to even say it, pay their rent on time, not good. Um, so and the problem, so and I did buy the second house there. So I bought the first one in 2019. I bought the second in 2020, late 2020. The market went down. I was like, oh my God, the stock market came back up a bit. I'm like, I'm putting more money in real estate because I know that. And so I bought the second
Hmm.
house on the same street, my same realtor, same buyer, me, and the same listing agent. It was
Oh,
only the
wow.
seller. It was all kind of the same people. But at that point, like the appreciation shot up so much after that that I couldn't afford to buy in that neighborhood or that area anymore because the
Right.
houses were cost too much. And you're not going to get the good cash flow. And so I looked in Wichita, Kansas, because I have family there. My nephew is a pilot in the Air Force. My sister and brother-in-law moved there. It's my nephew and his wife and their kids. And so and the houses were less. The rents were still decent. I bought a house there. I do have a property manager there. It didn't go as well as the Tennessee. It's
Hmm.
it's fine, but it's not quite what I wanted. But that leads to again us working together and how that's now jump started the next phase of my investing.
Right.
And
You've kind of entered a new chapter in what you were doing in your real estate investing. So I'm just kind of curious. You first started, first couple properties you did as a married couple. Now you went out on your own after the
mhm,
divorce and were able to say, now I got my own portfolio there, right?
yeah,
And that's really what built Tennessee. At that point in time, you then found Lady Landlords through New York Times. You came, you were part of the community. I remember you on a couple of the trainings that I usually do kind of like monthly, but you got to a
mhm,
point where then you said, hey, I think I'm ready, maybe for a little bit more support and to join then our inner circle community. Now, I know that was quite some time ago, but do you
yeah.
remember what made you say, hey, now might be a time to get a little outside support rather than just doing this on my own still?
There's two things that I mentioned before. My son, it was coming up on my son. It was like I think at that point it was maybe 2 years left.
Yeah, I think
And
he was 16 when we first
yeah,
talked.
yeah. And again, wanting to be able to travel. And then the kind of the third part of that was I knew after when he was 18, I wanted to leave California and move to Savannah or Nashville, probably Savannah, because I have friends there. And so it was like, how can I make this happen and have enough money and not be tied to a W-2 job and, all of that for the rest of my life? And so we talked and it was like I knew I wanted to do that because I needed that support. Like I was ready to grow and I was at that time especially and so actually it's been, over 2 years. I've really been thinking about selling the two Tennessee houses,
Right.
trying to sell them at the same time and then putting those two through a 1031 exchange into something, an apartment building, something obviously more expensive, but that's going to bring in more cash flow, making that next step because it really felt like that sure that works, but to make good money, I need to go into something bigger.
Hmm.
But I needed the support. Like I didn't have anyone to talk about this with. I didn't have anyone to run these ideas by and figure out if this is a good investment or that's a good investment or as you know, I tend to be like really like jump into things. Like I'm going to do this because I want everything. And so like, I need someone to kind of like, okay, wait, hang on. That might be a good idea. But let's make sure it really is a good idea. And so that's when we talked and I signed up with you. And then everything went sideways. Found out that I had cancer.
Mhm.
And I mean, it was right after I signed up with you. I was ready to go, like ready to like get my life, set. And
Yeah.
instead, I spent most of last year with surgery and chemo and radiation, dealing with that. And the kind of the same thing. I was so terrified about going on disability because I didn't know like what that would look like and how I was going to
Right.
afford. At that point, I had 3 mortgages and my rent in the Bay Area. And yes, they all cash flow, but you know, still, I was like, I'm gonna have to sell Wichita, like just so I don't have that loan. Like I've got to get out of this property. And thank God it turns out that the disability payment was enough money to comfortably be able to manage my finances and still just focus on getting through all the horrible treatments. But soon as I came out of that, it was, Becky, this is more important than ever. I
Yeah.
can't I can't like waste what life I have left. And not that I necessarily have a short life. I'm cancer free, that all of that, but that's still like, you know, as we all know, you go through something like that and it makes you reassess your priorities. And so my
Right.
priority is to get out of being stuck here sitting at a desk all day and have a life that I enjoy more.
Now, I was going to say, I wholeheartedly wish that the universe gave you a different type of sign
So true.
to get out of
100%.
the W-2 to move forward to live that life than the sign that it gave you and what you went through over this past year. So I would just like to start with that first.
Yeah.
But
Agree.
I understand completely what you're saying. I hear women all the time saying, well, I wish I could do this. Well, I hope I can do that. Oh, yeah, well, I could just do this in the future. Oh, next year I'll start. Oh, I'll wait till the kids get a little bit older. Or, oh, it's the busy season at work right now. I'll start in a few months. And I mean, I started Lady Landlords in 2020. Some of those people I've been hearing it from them
Still.
for 5 years,
Uh-huh.
right? Even now, oh, okay, well, the Fed's cut rates. Okay, has nothing to necessarily do that is indicative of what's going to happen with mortgage rates. Oh, well, it's
Right.
not low enough. Oh, well, let's just wait till 2026. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't think you understand. Like just the amount of life that like we're losing just by
Mm-hmm.
consistently saying, okay, I'll do this tomorrow, I'll do this tomorrow, I'll do this tomorrow. That's usually one of the biggest regrets people have when that time comes is the things that they had just said consistently for years. Like I said, you already knew that
Yeah.
beforehand. So I wish the universe threw you a different sign to make a change, but unfortunately, that is not something. But I heard from you during that time being like, I'm coming back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming back. It'll be around this time. And we kept in touch about that for when it would be the right time. And then you came in and just said, that's it. We're doing this. And it started actually even a little lower dialed in than even kind of where we are now, just a few months later. So
Yeah.
came back, restarted working together at the beginning now of 2025. What was the first thing that you went out and did?
Bought a duplex in
Yeah,
Wichita.
right.
Yeah.
Within like I think like 2 months
Yeah. Yeah.
of kind of saying, "Hey, I'm recommitting to this. This is go
Yeah.
time." Yeah.
And that one, I'm like, so, I mean, there's been additional expenses that, I didn't necessarily expect, but at least they're capital expenses. So it's not, and there was another little issue, but it really makes me feel positive about my ability to have enough income to do things. I mean, yes, there's still the loan and, all of those things, but the duplex just feels like totally the right move. And I'm so excited to like find another one. But yeah, so we did that. And then you said, okay, Tracy, like you can buy one more and you're done, or we can look at some other things. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so, yeah, and so we decided that, well, you helped me decide that I was going to do flips or do a flip and see what, make some money off of that. So I'd have more capital to invest.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I don't know, having a hard time. And then all of a sudden, got the right connections, everything lined up, and boom, I have a property.
Yeah.
And so by June, I had already bought two properties this year. And unfortunately, that one's kind of been problematic, but we're getting it back on track. And yeah,
Hmm.
and so that's just kind of like, I love it.
Yeah.
It's even though it's going badly right now, I love it. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And this is
Right.
going to be a big help in replacing my W-2 income. Because, yeah, you can have your monthly income and all of that, and that's great. But having the two together, was like light bulbs went off.
Well, that was what I was going to ask because I do remember when after you'd closed on Wichita and the duplex was settled, and then it was like, well, where do we go from here? And I remember when I mentioned the flip to you, you were not so thrilled by the suggestion, by the topic of conversation. I think we actually kind of took like a pause in that and said, hey, let's let it ruminate and kind of come back to that. What took you from like, no way, not the strategy, this is not the direction I want to go, to now being in the middle of your first flip?
So, part of it is back to that. I mean, that's a scary thing. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to do it from California because I can't afford to do that in California. That's not going to work. And like, how do I like find a property and make the numbers work and all of that? And actually, like when I just said that, one of the things that you introduced that I used for buying the duplex and loved and made made a huge difference for the flip as well is deal check. Like having
Yeah.
that fantastic way to analyze it and play with the numbers and have it just right there in front of me without me trying to like go brain dead, because I am not, like, even though I work for banks, I am not a finance person. Like I don't want to have to do any of the math myself. So like having that like plug stuff in and it spits
Right.
out like results, that's what I love. That's perfect. And so it was that, and it was also just, I realized I'm like, I'm not doing this alone. You have experience doing that. People in the inner circle have experience doing that. Lots of people on the bigger Lady Landlords group have experience
Right.
doing that. So I had the support to make it work. And that was kind of the helped get me out of my comfort zone. It's something I can try. I do love making properties look great again. And then the other piece of that also is all the information on alternative financing, because I never really knew and understood hard money lending and the fix and flip lending. And you look at it from the outside and you're like, oh my God, 11%, 12%, 10%, whatever. It's
Right.
like that, how can you do that? That doesn't make sense. And then you look at it as, oh, but you're paying interest only. And you're not like, that's not for the next 10 years. That's for the next like 2 months or 3 months or,
Right.
however many months you're doing it. So it's just a cost of doing business. And then you have the money to refurbish, and then like you come out of it and you make money. I was like, oh, okay. That's better.
Well, I feel like that goes back to the needing the education and that guidance to really give you the confidence, right? Because it
Exactly.
sounds like at that point in time, now you would join the inner circle, so you had guidance, you were around other people that were doing these things, but you personally needed to still understand how that hard money worked, what those options look like, and have that educational piece. And then once you kind of had both of those, now you were able to move forward and feel confident in taking those actions, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
but at first, one of those things, well, at first, both of those things were missing, but then one of
Yeah.
those things were missing that we really had to make sure to get all the pieces of the equation together. And I do feel like at that point in time, too, I'm glad that getting used to using that deal calculator and doing that deal analysis came into play, because there were a couple of weeks when I felt like we were talking and you were on a new city every single time we talked.
Yeah.
Ooh, I think I'm going to go with Savannah this time. Ooh, my friend told me about this market here. But what we weren't doing was looking at getting really broken down into some of those numbers, right?
Yep. Yep.
And more, and I think that that's kind of what changed things for you, was being able to say, okay, where do I still have the boots on the ground? Where do I have the education? Back in Tennessee, where you already owned other property. You
Hmm.
had your team, you had that realtor that was still in place, the handyman, you've had some great people in that context. The fact that you have a quasi property manager without the monthly commitment or the headache of dealing with the property manager, but you kind of get all the
So
good
true.
stuff and all the benefits without all the bad stuff. I mean, that's just fantastic there. And I'm
Yeah.
happy that you went back that way and you ended up staying at least in one of the two markets that you already owned property. Or I would
Right.
have been fine if you had chosen to go forward with the other market that you plan on moving to in a few years. That at least still made sense, but I felt like it came down to really looking at those numbers. And then
Hmm.
we even said for our first property, and there was two or three that I think we evaluated with you that you kind of brought to the group saying, hey, let's really heavily consider these.
Hmm.
And we talked about for this first one, it wasn't necessarily going to be your home run. It was your
Right.
proof of concept,
Right.
right? How does
Yep.
this work? Do I like it? Is this going to be a viable thing to move forward? How does this fit into my overall strategy, my larger plan? Was
Yeah.
really the goal for this, right?
Yeah.
This was
It
not the
was
one to
exactly.
retire you with. This was the
Right.
one to say, for proof of concept, does this make
Yeah.
sense or does this not? Using that as our barometer for success or unsuccessful, how do you feel proof of concept has fit so far with this
Yeah.
flip, even with some of the challenges you faced?
Yeah. No, definitely. I'm really excited about, and I've actually gone and, made a huge number of changes also in my mindset and in
Yeah.
how I'm doing and calling it my business now, hiring a new CPA and going
Yes.
through that whole thing. And because I'm looking at this now as my business, and part of my business is going to be flips. It's and yes, proof of concept is there, but I've also, fortunately, because of that, we went into looking at it that way. I've been able to give myself grace, and a lot of it's like, okay, I didn't like the lender, and there were some, costs that I didn't understand and realize. But you know what? It's my first one. Now I know. Now I know
Right.
better what to look for, and it wasn't necessarily bad. It's just,
No.
part of the learning process. It's fine, and I still don't feel like I don't think I'm going to make as much money as I had originally hoped. I know I'm not, but I still feel confident that I am going to make some money. And
Right.
the great thing that, because again, calculated risk. The great thing with this property is it also still makes sense as a rental.
Right.
So that's my second exit strategy. If for some reason there's a problem with selling it, if like it's not selling, not getting what I need to get, I'll make it a rental, and I'll, still I'll have to, like, of course, refinance and get the loan that's like closer to 6% than whatever mine is, 11%, 10%. But, it'll still cash flow. It'll still make money.
Right. Right. So, question in there is for your first flip here, what would just be, you said, there'd be some things that you would look at differently. Number one tip, number one piece of advice you would give somebody getting into flips that you wish you knew at the beginning?
Um, it all boils down to contractor, really. And,
Right.
I thought we had a good one. We went by referral, checked the boxes, and it just his personal life blew up, and that just blew up my job. That said, the other person that I was considering that was from this realtor who's, my like big part of the team, she told me, she's like, yeah, you know what, the guy that she had recommended to do the job, who had bid it, his mother passed away, and so he ended up
Oh,
going
wow.
back to, his original country, for like a month.
Oh,
So
wow.
if I had hired, him, I would have still been in the same boat. So it's, things happen, and you have to
Right.
like plan around that. And I think one of the things I really have taken from this, which is a little, I really have to think about the plan for next year. I don't think I want to do another one from California. Like
Okay.
I want to be my boots on the ground. So I'm there at the house, even if it's not every day, it's like, every other day, that I can be like, what is going on? Why are you, I'm here. Why is no one else here? Kind of thing.
Right.
Um, so that's, I think that is one thing that I've definitely kind of changing. Like, no, it's not so easy, to do it from afar unless, if things go right, it should have been great. It would have been perfect. If he
Right.
had, even if he had stretched his due date a little bit, it would have been fine. But
Well, I think
no,
unfortunately, and what you said there, what I want to remind you of is that there was nothing that you could have done differently to end up with that outcome, right?
right,
Either of those
exactly.
contractors, the one where the mother passed away, and the second guy where you said his personal life kind of blew up, and I know we've talked about that a little more,
Yeah.
but those are things that were out of your control. That
Hmm.
happens in real estate investing, right? That's
Exactly.
that's kind of that bet we take, and that's also why it's important to factor in. And once again, back to that analysis, to think about your carrying costs, to make sure you understand where your profit margins are, because life still will happen. You
Yeah.
have the most rigorous contractor review process of all time, and things can still happen. It's the same with the tenant. I've done podcast episodes about some of my horror tenants and talked about how one of my worst tenants, I think ever, had an 800 plus credit score and made over $100,000 and had no debt. That
Hmm.
was the worst tenant I've ever had. From a screening perspective, there was nothing that I could have done to realize that the man had absolutely no common sense. There was nothing that I could do to have screened for that. And there was
Right.
nothing that you could have done. You can't ask a contractor for his mother's medical reports. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Like those are
Yeah.
just
No,
not things that,
exactly.
we can control, and that's going to be okay. That is part of what investing is. And I'm happy
Hmm.
that even with these things that have been thrown at you, that you still said, I love this. And
Yeah.
in our last few minutes here, I just want to address that there's been another decision that you've made this year that is also helping you grow and scale and is also really kind of dictated where our plan's going to go for you, not just the rest here of
Yeah.
2025, but in 2026. Tell our listeners what you've decided.
Yeah. It was during one of our weekly meetings. We had a goal setting and talking about those, like breaking your plans down and all of that. And all of a sudden I was like, I'm setting a date. I'm quitting my W-2 job as of May 31st next year. That's it. And so now instead of it's, well, I'm getting myself set up and so I can quit my job, eventually I'm going to quit my job, I've got some time, we're going to figure it out. I've set myself, that is my goal. And so whenever I talk
Yeah,
about it, which obviously I can't talk about it to everybody, but whenever I do talk about it, I say that, like, when I quit my job next year, when, not if.
correct.
Granted, like, life still happens, but May 31st, that's the date.
Yes, it is. And we're going to have you come back on and talk about that, what it looks like now being full-time real estate investor later
Yeah,
next year. But I love that you said
exactly.
that. And honestly, mindset is such a large part of this game. It's not always just about numbers, like we said, that confidence piece. Who cares if you have all the knowledge, but you don't use it? Who cares if you're bringing in all the cash flow and making all the money, but it doesn't give you the life that you want?
Right.
Right?
Yes,
So I
exactly.
love that you've been very cautious, and I've heard you multiple times catch yourself and not say, well, if, but really that when, and to
Hmm.
really stick to that. And I am really, really proud of you for being able to do that. But I have seen so much growth this year between saying, okay, new market, okay, let's move to a flip, okay, let's come on the podcast. There has been so much that you have done. So thank you
Yeah.
for coming on today and just sharing your
Yeah.
story. What Let's just wrap up with, for any of our listeners out there who are still sitting there being like, I don't know, maybe I should wait till next year. Maybe I should wait till rates drop a little bit lower. What would you say to them?
There's this thing called time value of money. And next year, even if the rates drop, it's still going to be more expensive. So, you can't let that stop you. Do it now. Don't overpay. Like, do your research. And that's really what it's about.
Right.
Do your research and make a calculated risk.
Tracy, I completely agree with you. I think that's great advice. Thank you once again for your time. I greatly
Yeah,
appreciate you sharing your
my
story and
pleasure.
inspiring so many of our listeners. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For all of our Lady Landlord listeners out there, please do make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Also, if you enjoyed today's episode, and I know you did, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. So those reviews will help other women show that they are not alone and also help find our community. Thank you very much, and see you all back in the Lady Landlords Facebook community. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlords.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.